This week on the House Edition, we're building the entire structure for the main floor of the house, the porch, and the roof over the porch, and we're going to use some big trees as posts and set them on some giant boulders to hold them up. Before we frame in the wall for the basement, we're moving in a bunch of giant boulders because I'm eventually going to build the bed in the basement out of giant rocks, and eventually I'm going to build the bed in the master bedroom out of these giant boulders and a few cedar timbers. So this is the beginning of my incredibly overkill, ridiculous rock bed frame. This bit here I cut from the backside and then the front, and then, you know, the blade isn't quite enough to reach all the way through, so I just whacked it with the old sledgehammer and then ground off the little bits there. This is just so that when we put the wall here, you know, there's room for the wall. I didn't do any math when I picked up these rocks. I just kind of eyeballed them, and this one ended up a little wider than would fit in the room, which is fine. It'll just go right up against the wall. But yeah, so the idea is I'm gonna have that on one side, that one there on the other side, and then the bed will kind of like tuck in between them with a wood frame that'll be notched in here out of some big like 6x6s or 6x8s or something like that, something super overkill. So like, and then the headboard of the bed will be in between here. So this here is going to be the footboard, and I marked a straight line across there so you can see. I'm just going to cut a little bit off at each end so it'll sit flat. This is the one I'm the most excited about aesthetically. This one's pretty cool. That one's all right. This one's my favorite. You could even say that's a nice boulder. And just like the huge slab of granite we used for the stair landing, all of these boulders came from up at the mountain property that we've also been working on this year. Before we put the rocks in place inside the house, I decided to cut the bottoms of them as flat as possible just to get a little bit of the messy part done before putting it all in the house. While I was cutting up these giant rocks, my mother-in-law stopped by to deliver us a few chickens. We already had a bunch of ducks and geese, but my wife wanted a few chickens so that we'd have chicken eggs as well. One of the reasons being that with duck eggs, you cannot make meringue or anything that requires beaten egg whites. So anyway, we had to give my mother-in-law and all of the dogs and one of the chickens a tour of what we were working on. I'm just cutting down some boards for the headers. With the headers and the height of the wall, it works out that the headers would either be like half an inch short of the top plate or like too tall with any standard size board. So I'm taking some 2x8s and milling them down to 6.5 inches. Oh, nice. And that way we don't have any little stubbies above the headers. Now that the sawmill is back here on my property, it makes things a lot easier for working on the house. All the other neighbors, friends, family that use it didn't have any plans with it for the rest of the year. So we brought it down to the house, and now I can modify or make boards as needed on site, which is a huge time saver. Obviously, a table saw would work, but this works even better. Framed in 7 years or something like that. Been a minute. We started by framing up the outside wall in the basement because that wall holds up all of the beams for the main floor of the house on the addition. And we used almost entirely boards that were left over from the forms for the cement that we did in the last episode. We also used some other random boards that I'd milled up, but we were able to repurpose a lot of the form boards and use them for studs, headers, other pieces. All of the beams that we use for the main floor of the house are 6x8s that I had milled earlier in the year, and we pre-stained 3 sides of them because that'll be a lot easier than staining them afterward. And then for the subfloor, we used 1 1/8 tongue and groove plywood. I've never used 1 1/8 plywood before. That stuff is very heavy. Also, we pre-painted the bottom side of the 1 1/8 plywood because that will be the finished ceiling in the basement. We decided the beam saw wasn't quite accurate enough for this type of beam work.
This has got to be pretty accurate.
Yeah. What we're doing here is making all the framing. We're like post and beam framing this corner to put windows in. So there'll be windows every 32 inches. 26-inch wide windows. The posts are on 32-inch centers all the way across that wall, and then like a third of the way across that wall. So. We have many, many 6x8s to cut.
Yikes.
Next step was framing up all of the windows in the south and west corners of the main floor. This is going to be kind of the centerpiece of that main floor of the house. We used all 6x8s as well for this. So nice, beefy beams, way bigger than necessary for strength, but they look really nice. In the spaces between each beam, there will be a window. So this whole room basically will be all windows. Tons of natural light, which is something I'm always a big fan of. And as usual, the geese had to come over and give their opinions. They're very opinionated little birds. You decided that you're the bad guy?
I don't know why, but
Gooses!
they've been really chasing me around
Hey!
today.
This is Steven. Steven is friend. Quit chasing Steven. Be nice. Yeah.
Wow, they listen to you like dogs.
Unlike the floor joists, we did not pre-stain these beams, largely because some of them were freshly milled and not particularly dry, so we wanted to let them dry out for a while before staining them, but also because it wouldn't be very difficult to stain them after the fact. Once we had the window corner all framed up, the rest of the framing for the main floor is pretty standard, just stick framing with 2x6s, and then, frame it all laying down and then stand it all up in one piece. A lot of times you would sheet the outside of the wall before standing it. In this case, that wasn't really easier, so we just, stood it up and then put the sheeting on afterward. Once we got the gable end wall stood up and sheeted, it was time to put in the ridge beam, which is a 6x12 milled out of a spruce tree that I cut down earlier this year. This beam will be fully exposed when the room is finished, so once again, we're pre-staining it because it's just a lot easier that way. And fun fact about spruce is that it's very lightweight when it's dry. So this beam, despite being a 15-foot long 6x12, it was actually fairly easy to get it up into place.
All right.
Just like that. Extra strength. Because you and your brother are getting fat. We need extra strength to hold this house up. Mostly your brother. You're not too fat. Yeah, no, don't. It's mostly your brother that's fat. You're just very strong. Apparently, we forgot to turn the cameras on the day that we put up all the rafters over the living room. But all of those rafters are not going to be exposed, so they're just simple 2x12s. For now, the rafters will just be enclosed and hidden, which gives us more space for insulation as well.
Well, you've been gone for a while.
I have. Well, I was gone for 10 days. Came back with a new tattoo. That sounds like a song. Anyway, guys got a good bit done on the house while I was gone. Got the roof on there, roughly. So now we have to work on the framing for the porch and the porch roof, which is why there's a gigantic boulder standing here. That rock is what that tree over there is going to sit on. So that's the main post. It'll go up through the porch all the way to the ridge beam, which you can see a little stick up there that's, representing that for now so we could get this in the right spot. So anyway, over the weekend I harvested some rocks and some cedar trees. And
Do these rocks come from up at your property?
Nope. Came from here out in the woods.
Really?
Do you remember the big rock by the tabletop jump?
I was about to ask if this was by the tabletop.
That's that one. But it was like 50% underground. That one came from right down there by the little runoff stream there. And then the other one that's behind the skid steer right now came from actually underneath one of the trees that we're using. So yeah, this was the first tree that I got. I chopped a few of its roots and then pushed it over with the skid steer so I could get
the whole root ball and then pressure washed it. And if it was early spring or late spring, anytime in the spring, you'd be able to just grab a chunk of this bark and peel it like a banana. But seeing as how it's September,
And very dry.
the bark is, yes, the
Super
bark is
dry.
very, very stuck. So what we're doing is peeling off the outer bark with, draw knives and various other tools. And then the inner bark, our little pressure washer here, the electric pressure washer, does a nice job of stripping that off.
Oh yeah, you can see that.
It peels it right off without scarring up the wood underneath. And it's just faster than any sort of other method. Yeah. So time consuming, but I think it'll look really cool with all these curvy, interesting looking trees.
I think it's gonna look sick.
I like this texture.
Yeah, the texture on cedar trees when they curve like that is really cool.
Yeah, isn't it?
Also,
It's like ribs.
the rock that's on the far side was right here.
Was it?
Yep. I was like, hey, that looks like a good rock. It's under that tree. It'll probably hurt the tree. Oh, wait, that's a nice tree for the post. Perfect.
Cedar, of all the species of tree in this area, is generally one of the easiest to peel the bark off of. But in the middle of summer, cedar trees have lost a lot of their moisture. Bark kind of glues itself to the tree in the hot part of the year. We found through experimentation that if we use the draw knives and axes and various sharp implements to get the majority of the bark off, we could use the pressure washer to wash off the inner bark where it meets the cambium layer. We started with the largest tree, which unsurprisingly goes in the center of these three beams, and we also used the largest rock to place this tree on. I got inspiration for using the rocks like this from what we did with the rocks that we held up the house on when we poured the slab. So we're going to use the same kind of method for this, where we place the giant boulders in just the dirt out in front of the house, and then place the beams on them, build the whole structure, and then later we'll come back in and pour a slab for the patio around the rocks to lock them in place. But these rocks are so massive, there's zero concern of them moving around. This middle one that we started with, I'm guessing weighs upwards of 6,000 to 8,000 pounds, because my skid steer is capable of picking up around 5,000 to 6,000 pounds, and it couldn't really pick this rock up. It could just kind of shove it around.
Tedious and time-consuming process making the underside of this tree fit the top side of that rock.
I imagine so.
But we're real close.
It looks really close.
Yeah,
From
super
up
close.
here.
Super duper close. The great thing is this tree's really heavy, so when you set it down on the rock, it marks itself where the high points are.
Little rotten patch.
Yeah, I mean, it's to be expected in a cedar tree this big, this close to the bottom. I'm not worried about it because it's going to be very dry under here for the rest of its existence.
But this is the other really time-consuming part of using these trees as beams, where we have to set it on the rock, trace out kind of a rough idea of what we need to contour it, lift it up, grind out just a little bit, and then set it back down and do that process over and over again until the tree fits just perfectly on the rock. The other hard part of this was getting the tree vertically aligned, because level or plumb is not really a meaningful term when you're using a super crooked tree. So trying to figure out what angle it needed to be at to look the best and also be in line with the ridge beam of the house and everything else that's going on took a little bit of back and forth to try to figure that out.
It'll settle a little bit once we get a bunch of weight on it.
Even once we had it fitting well enough to look right, we had to keep adjusting it to get the tree positioned vertically the way we wanted it.
Get in my swamp!
This is my swamp.
My swamp. Okay, this is my swamp. Good to me.
Looks like the dogs are getting groomed today.
Yeah, they don't like it at all.
Einstein, you're so poofy.
The second tree was probably the easiest to place because it was smaller, it had less of a root flare, and also it was going on by far the flattest rock. The last one, however, was definitely the most difficult because of the exact opposite reasons. It had the most amount of the roots remaining on the tree and also was going on the least flat rock.
You're supposed to have your hard hat on when you're underneath something that heavy.
Hard hat isn't gonna help me if this falls on my head.
I know, but you're supposed to have it on anyway.
Why? So I can be more uncomfortable while I do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. How is it?
It's getting there, real slowly. This one's by far the most difficult of the three, but it's looking pretty good. We still have a couple inches of height to work with.
We do?
Yeah. And the roots, some of the roots are just gonna be floating. That's fine, we can just lop them off if I don't like the way they look.
And I've always found that when you're building with weird shaped trees, it's really easy to pick a cool looking tree and then install it in a way that just doesn't look right at all. It takes a lot of time and consideration to make these weird shaped trees look intentional instead of just like you just picked a random tree and put it there. Just a little bit of changing the angle, moving it around a little bit, looking at it from all the different directions, and then deciding which way looks the best.
We finally got that post set over there, and got the top chopped off roughly where it needs to be. Same with this one. Now I'm cutting a pocket in the wall because we forgot to do that when we framed it for the beam to sit in, and then we'll be ready to throw a beam up on here.
Finally, we had all 3 posts installed and braced off to the house, and we could start installing the massive beams to hold up the porch roof. After we had the 2 side beams installed, we took some measurements and realized we needed to make some more adjustments to the center tree to get it to align right between the other ones, because when we put it up, we were basically just eyeballing it because we didn't have anything to measure to. But once we had the other 2 posts in with their beams on top of them, those beams obviously had to be in a very specific spot to be square to the house, level and all that. Once we had those there, we could measure and found that the center one was off by a little bit.
We got the 2 big beams up on the sides, and then we realized this one needed some more adjustment before we can do its beam. Also, we don't have a way to lift it that high, anything that high, so we decided we'll build at least part of the porch structure so that we have somewhere to put some ladders, and then we can get the beam up on the roof and slide it out there.
Yeah, what is the height to the peak up there?
8, 16, 20 and some change. How'd you go? Patricia, why are you being dumb? Come on. Guys, what is your problem? The ducks are going to escape. Get out there. You don't want to be locked in there by yourself. Patricia, come on. There you go. That's, oh, no, almost. Nice try. No. Fine, go back in. I don't care. Jeez. Dumbasses. Get in there then. If you don't want to come out, don't come out. Okay, how about now? Let's try this again. Do you want to come outside? There we go. Oh, look at that. Everybody's coming out. Wow, it's a miracle. That was complicated, unnecessarily. So it may not look like we did much, but we've got, Chris is almost finished with a notch in that beam. I've got a pocket in this one that matches the shape of the beam that's gonna hold up the porch. And got a pocket on this side. If anybody asks, the beam goes all the way through. It doesn't, but it'll look like it will. Yeah, so we're just gonna make a notch in this one here, and then we'll be ready to put up the beams that'll hold the floor, the porch joists. This notch is gonna go all the way through because over here, the porch is gonna protrude out past about 3 feet and go back this way alongside the house as a little walkway to make use of that extra overhang there.
That'll be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I like your GoPro mount, Ethan.
The rebar driven into the dirt.
It's a good tripod.
Yeah, it's a monopod.
Yeah, monopod. That would be the right word.
Yes.
Before we installed the main ridge beam, we decided to get in the 2 beams that hold up all of the joist beams for the porch because we needed something to tie it all together. All 3 of these trees were just kind of sitting there with just a few little braces on them, and they were all kind of wobbling back and forth, and nothing really was holding them in place. So we decided to put up those 2 beams that tied all 3 of those trees together before trying to put on the ridge beam so that everything would be a little bit more stable and aligned.
Oh, hi, geese.
Now they're happy that you let them out.
Look, one of them was playing with the dog toy. Or trying to eat it, as the case may be.
And of course, because I like to do everything the most complicated and difficult way possible, all of these beams are getting notched into the posts so that it looks as seamless as possible, which means using the laser level to make some marks, and then using the chainsaw, chisels, various other implements to chunk out all the wood and get a notch that's just perfect for the width of the beam.
Okay, Chewy. You want to go up the ladder?
Here, let's get it farther over my shoulders so we can...
You want to sit on the ladder?
Yeah, once I get up there. Unlike you, Chris, we're not all 7 feet tall.
Yeah. Ain't close.
Close? Yeah.
Stubby little arms and short little legs.
And for all the beams on the porch, once again, we're using 6x8s. It's a size that, one, I think looks really good because it's really beefy without being horrendously overkill. And 2, it's a size that is pretty easy for me to mill out of the trees I have around.
This is a beam from that tree we took down at the other property the other day.
Oh, yeah?
At like 14 feet up the tree, just what I could count from center to corner of beam, 120 years old.
Really? I wouldn't have
Yeah.
guessed that much.
So like, it's probably at least a 150-year-old tree.
Wow. You already said hello to me.
Good morning. Good morning, Bjorn. Wow.
Finally, we had all 3 posts installed and braced off to the house, and we could start installing the massive beams to hold up the porch roof. Just like the ridge beam for the house, all 3 of these are 6x12s, and we did not pre-stain these ones, largely because it was raining shortly before and during when we were installing them, so the beams were a little bit wet. So we installed them, waited for them to dry, and then stained them after the fact.
We've been making really good progress on the house addition, but as with most things I build, I didn't plan it out all ahead of time. I had a rough idea, and then figuring it out as I go, which means I gotta constantly cut down more trees to mill more lumber for the changing and expanding vision of what it's gonna be. And stuff that I just, I milled the most important stuff first, and now we're getting to the other stuff. So what I'm doing this morning is walking around with the chainsaw, looking for a good cedar tree to cut down. I'm looking for one that's, either unhealthy already because we need some boards for the deck, and we need some wood for the siding, and we need a couple more 6x8 beams to hold up the deck. So first on my list here is to look at the ones alongside the downhill portion of the rally track here, because there's a bunch of trees that are close to the edge. I could also take out this large tree here because it's been, it's very close to the rally track. It's been hit with the skid steer and probably the Humvee and various other things, so I can do that. But it's not the straightest tree ever. It may look like it, but it's not. Also, that would provide me with some beams, but it wouldn't do anything for deck boards because those need to be cedar. It's an option. Oh look, Bjorn and Einstein have joined me. Hello, boys. Good morning. Yes, good morning. Obviously, there's a reason I came over to this corner of the track first, because I'd been eyeing this tree for a while. But I think I'm gonna go for that cedar tree right there. It's fairly straight, nice and tall, not a lot of branches down low, so that'll be really good lumber for the siding of the house. But the main reason is it's looking pretty unhealthy. Wow, the geese are lit. Anyway, it's looking pretty unhappy there. I generally prefer to cut down trees that are already dead or mostly dead. The problem is we need cedar, and cedars pretty much never die. I mean, they do, but they take like 100 years to do so, and then by the time they're dead, they're rotten. This one over here
The top of it, I'm sure you can't really tell on camera, but the top of it's looking really sparse and kind of dried up. There's not a lot of new growth, so it's struggling where it's at, probably due to lack of water. Cedar trees like a lot of water, and on this steep hillside here, there's not all that much. Also, it'll get a little more sunlight for the garden, especially with this new greenhouse my wife just built. Look at that thing. Make sure it wants to fall the right direction. Looks like it does. That's good. This bottom 12-foot section is nice and big in diameter, so it'll make some good 1x10s for the cedar siding on the house. And then probably the second one will make 1x10s as well. And then after that, it'll be too small for 10-inch stuff, so then I'll be milling like 2x6 and 2x8 deck boards and a couple of 6x8 beams for the edge of the deck. And then right here we've got this little secondary top situation, so we'll just end that log there at I guess that's just 9 feet. It's not a standard length, but it's what makes sense. Wow, not gonna get as much lumber as I was hoping out of this tree, but this is evidence of how unhappy this tree was. And we're now like 50 feet up the tree, and it's actually more rotten here than at the base. Oh well, there'll be a couple boards here, 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 and the rest, firewood. With these cedar logs, I was able to get a little bit of dual purpose milling done in that I was milling extra 6x8s to finish the porch framing and also getting some 1.5-inch thick material for the decking on the porch. On a few of these logs, I was also even able to get out a couple of 1x10s that are going to be used for the siding, which will probably be in the spring next year, but I'm going to start milling it, a little bit at a time as I go. One of the downsides of milling cedar is that its bark is very abrasive and it dulls the blade super quick. On the plus side, bark's pretty easy to peel off. Also, this is covered in dirt, so I'm gonna peel it off where the cuts are, make the blade last a little longer. Cedar is a very bizarre wood to work with because it is quite soft, and yet it dulls the blades of whatever you're using to cut it faster than any other tree that grows around here. I don't exactly know what is in the cedar tree that causes it to dull blades so fast, but despite being very soft, it does not cut well, and it's very hard on blades. So normally, milling a log like this, I wouldn't take nearly this much off on the first cut, or the first side rather. I'd just take off, a little bit. And first cut and the third cut in terms of sides of the log, those two determine how wide your boards are going to be. And then the second cut and then the fourth cut, that determines how many you get. Obviously you can mess around with that if you want to roll the log extra, but that's the most efficient way to do it. That said, the other end of this log is super rotten. So, the best way to get a couple of really nice wide boards is to mill them off this side before taking any of the other sides off, just because it's rotten in the middle. So if I made it, let's say 10 inches wide here, and then started sectioning it, I'd only get like one decent board off each end, and then the rest would all be rotten in the middle over at the other end. So I'm gonna kind of do this one abnormally just to try and get as much out of it as I can, given the rottenness. With that in mind, instead of turning it 90 degrees, I'm gonna flip it over 180, do the same thing on the other side where I take a thin slab, an 1.5 inch piece for a deck board, and then a 1 inch thick piece for siding. Whatever's left, I'll mill into probably 2x6s for the deck, and some of them will be good, some of them won't, but the point is I'll get the most out of the good edges before getting it down to the width, if that makes any sense. But Western red cedar is by far the most rot resistant tree that grows in this part of the world, so it makes great decking, siding, and fence posts, or just any sort of wood that's going to be exposed to the elements. I need an X-ray machine so I can see how rotten it is, like 1.5 feet back here.
Right, it'd be awesome to know.
Like, because I don't know how quickly it gets bad. The other end is totally solid. I'll just turn it into a 6x8. Right now it's 9 inches thick, because that's a multiple of 1.5 inches, which 1.5 inches is what the thickness of the deck boards are going to be. Right now on the bottom, there's a lot of good, not rotten wood, and if I mill 1 inch off of that, then I'm left with like mostly rot. Whereas, if I mill 1 inch off the top, the rot's closer to the surface, but there's less of it by volume or percentage. We'll try that, see how it goes. Nice 1x6. Yeah, we'll see.
Does it only go up to like here-ish, maybe?
Who knows? If we're lucky, yeah. With the porch all framed up, we put a few scraps of plywood down to have a surface to work on, and then it was finally time to put in the ridge beam. Once in place, it was a lot of measuring, checking, marking, adjusting, measuring again to make sure everything was nice and square and straight before we started putting up the rafters. And the rafters for this section are the absolutely massive full dimension 3x12s that I milled earlier this year, because these will be 100% exposed, as the porch obviously will not need any insulation on the roof, so the full height and width of these massive beams will remain exposed. So again, we pre-stained them before putting them up. I don't really know if there's a word for it, but if there is a word for the opposite of a fear of heights, that's what I have. I really enjoy working up in high places, framing roofs, building tree houses. There's just something about it that it's not even really an adrenaline rush. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. It's just something that I've always really enjoyed. A little frosty out here this morning.
Yeah, it's actually kind of cold. Chris is in the shop right now trying to start a fire.
Oh my god. By the time he's in the shop, it's gonna be warm. What is that man doing? Once we got all the rafters in place, we were able to sheet the rest of the roof. We used 5/8 plywood for this because we're spanning 24 inches or more with these beams. So we need a little bit thicker plywood to handle the snow load and to keep it from sagging. And we got this roof on just in time because all of our good weather pretty much came to an end right after we got the roof on. And of course, that was the goal from the beginning of this project this spring, was to get the roof on before snow. And we did manage to accomplish that.
Getting pretty close on the roof framing.
Yeah, which is good because it's supposed to rain all next week. Got all the sheeting up, except I'm about 5/8 of a sheet short.
Really?
Yep. And it's largely just because of that weird layout we did out there on the porch, because it just means we wasted a little bit of every sheet, and just that little bit extra means that the half sheet on the end here, this half sheet would have been exactly half had this sheet been a full sheet, but to line up with the rafters, this one had to be cut back about, well, I don't know, however wide one of those little rips is down there. Which means that this had to be more than half a sheet, meaning the other cutoff of it wasn't enough for another one of those. So, this is the price you pay for doing things weirdly, but, you know, it's just one sheet of plywood I gotta pick up. And then throw some tar paper down, pick up the metal should be in next week, which is good, because next week it's also supposed to start raining. But as soon as I get the tar paper on, which I'll do tomorrow morning, we'll be waterproof at least.
I mean, pretty good timing overall.
Yeah, not bad. And we managed to get the roof on before snow, despite the fact that I added in a lot of complication and changed many things along the way as we've been building this addition. I planned out the rough concept of it before we started in terms of rough dimensions and layout and whatnot, but as we went, I kept adding in more and more unique bits and pieces like the rock landing and using trees as posts and milling all the lumber and all of that. So the fact that we were still able to get the roof on and get it all dried in before the worst of the fall rains and snow came was a huge success. And I am absolutely stoked on how everything's turning out. My wife is also very stoked about everything that's going on with the addition and how it's all coming together. And I'm also really happy that you've all been enjoying watching this, because building houses is something I did long before we started a YouTube channel, and I always enjoyed it, especially in cases where I could get creative like this. So I'm really happy that it's something you all enjoy watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.